All right, we've been following the gatherings at Nkandla. Earlier, the former President Jacob Zuma spoke to his supporters. Let's see what's happening now. We take you live to Samkele Maseko. Samkele, we saw those supporters dissipate after he spoke earlier. How big are the crowds outside Nkandla? What's happening?
At this point in time, Francis, the crowds outside the homestead of former President Jacob Zuma are not that large. They dispersed after the former president addressed them, and also after the suspended Secretary General Ace Magashule addressed them in saying that they had a very fruitful political engagement with the former president yesterday, and they learned politics, and they, from now moving forward, they will be getting the directive from their commander-in-chief in the form of former President Jacob Zuma, saying that even if ANC structures are disbanded, as he says, that there are those who want to disband structures all across the country. This comes after the Free State Provincial Executive Committee was disbanded by the NEC, particularly after that judgment by the Supreme Court of Appeals. So they are saying that they will now be taking directives from their commander-in-chief and essentially saying that they must listen to nobody else but Ace Magashule and other leaders of the ANC, who are anticipating that the former President Jacob Zuma will now be addressing a media briefing. Many leaders of the ANC who were able to come here to Katawatunusa to engage with the former president, such as Tony Yengeni, NEC member, part of the NEC delegation. Lindy Sisulu, who's also part of that delegation, was here earlier on. We spoke to her, who said that she had a very fruitful engagement with the former president as part of the NEC delegation, and would then be going to give a report to the NEC. We also saw Nomakuku Simelani Zulu, the MEC of Health in the province, also ANC, PEC and PWC member, and Zintle, an ANC legislature member in the provincial legislature, and also PEC member, who were also here. Other leaders of the ANC couldn't make it due to COVID-19 regulations. I know that Mzwandile Masina, the mayor of Ekurhuleni and ANC regional chairperson, would have loved to make his way to Nkandla to support the former president, but he couldn't come as he would not want to be seen to disobeying lockdown regulations in the economic hub of the country, which is essentially the epicenter of the third wave of the Delta variant in the country. Then you had large gatherings when the former president was addressing, some of them obeying COVID-19 regulations, some of them not, particularly knowing that political gatherings in the country are banned. The police minister, Peggy Cele, pretty much did not have a high contingency of deployment of police officers outside the home of the former president, but we saw large numbers of police officers in and around Nkandla, particularly with the roadblocks that had taken place.
And earlier today there were reports of gunshots, Samkele, but no injuries and no major altercations between those police officers and the crowds.
Yes, there was gunfire earlier on. The police officers came after that gunfire went off. They were here in the entrance to the home of the former president, and they did engage with those whom are wearing camouflage uniforms purporting to be war veterans of Umkhonto Wesizwe. Some of them are, some of them are not, in the words of ANC supporters and members. And when we were reporting live, gunfires were shot in the air where we were. I did capture those visuals live on the South African Broadcasting Corporation, and also on my right-hand side there was a Toyota Quantum which had a large number of gentlemen whom had firearms as well and were firing gunshots in the air, which also prompted Edward Zuma, the son of former President Jacob Zuma, to take to the podium just behind me over there and warn ANC members and supporters that those who are here and who are here to protect the president must be disciplined, and they must not do things that are untoward and that will get them into trouble. That is when they stopped ceasing fire in the form of firing their live ammunitions in the air. Earlier on, we also did speak on the phone to the Minister of Police, Peggy Cele, who said that they would not be sending any police officers here to disperse the crowds, as that would be catastrophic, and they are trying to avoid another Marikana situation or a fatal shootout that will result in innocent people either getting injured or innocent people losing their lives. The exact words he used: sometimes you must avoid Samkele to be sucked in, where you will be involved in a catastrophic firearm fight in the end, as he had said. And of course, as he had said, that there were a number of people with live ammunition coming from Umsinga, coming from the hostels, from some of the townships in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. So he was saying that it's best to use your head in this point in time and not to be emotional, and just exercise maximum restraint, and then afterwards assess what happens and then take necessary action, but at all costs avoid a catastrophic situation where there will be negative publicity to the government. But also COVID-19 regulations were not being adhered to here. But on the politics of the day, those who were able to come to support the former president came in their numbers. I know the regions in the eThekwini region came in their numbers, led by Stwala from that particular eThekwini region, who was marshalling that motorcade, where our colleague Jade Lee Paulser was following that motorcade. We've seen a number of ANC supporters from Mzala Nxumalo region. We also saw members of the ANC coming as far as Mpumalanga province, led by Ngrai Ngwenya and Pat Ngomane, who came here to insist that Vusi Shongwa from Mpumalanga, an MEC whom we had earlier on reported that he's making their way here, he did not come to Nkandla, and that was a misinterpretation on our part. We also saw some members of the ANC coming from the Free State province of the suspended Secretary General of the ANC, making their way here. Then the interesting twist was the arrival of the lawyers of former President Jacob Zuma. Advocate Masugu and Advocate Dalimpofu arrived here, and when the former president was addressing his supporters there, when he was taking jabs at the erstwhile public protector Thuli Madonsela, who's no longer in office, as Busiswe Mkhobane is now the public protector, saying and referring to her as Intogazi, and also saying that she was part and parcel in the construction and institution of an illegal state capture commission of inquiry, which from the onset was poised at finding former President Jacob Zuma guilty, whom this evening, after receiving that legal advice from his lawyers, Dalimpofu and Advocate Masugu, he will be addressing this press briefing, which will begin any time from now. It was supposed to start at 6 o'clock this evening. It could not start on time. It's not yet clear why it has not yet gotten our head, but our colleagues, Ayanda Mhlongo, Simpiwe Makanya, and Vusi Makosini, and Ule Hlope, they are inside the home of the former president and will be bringing that blow-to-blow coverage of when the former president Jacob Zuma addresses his supporters in that media briefing that's going to be held. Though to be Vusima Kosini covering the radio aspect and Adam Tongo covering the broadcast TV aspect.
Well, Samkele, do you think those legal issues could be something that's holding up the briefing? Maybe the lawyers looking at the fact that the Constitutional Court spoke out against what the former president had to say about judges, about how he's criticized the courts in his political statements in the past. This is just speculation, but do you think they might be telling him to be careful because the courts could also consider what he says tonight and what he said earlier?
I don't want to dwell too much on the speculation aspect of it, but what we do know is that when the former president was speaking on the podium addressing those ANC members, some of the things he was saying were contrary to what is contained in his rescission court application papers to the Constitutional Court. For one, the former president says he still maintains he will not go back to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and he still says that when the Constitutional Court ruled that he must be forced to go to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry and answer all questions posed to him, he then took a decision that he will no longer go to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. The former president also came out in relative good health. In his court papers, he says that a jail term would automatically seal his fate as his health condition is not good. He also says that when he left the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, he left the inquiry in the court papers to take medication. But in the court papers, he says he took a decision to leave the State Capture Commission of Inquiry because uyenzelela the Deputy Chief Justice, meaning that the Deputy Chief Justice and the chairperson of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry is biased, and he will no longer entertain a commission that is biased negatively towards him, and he thus took a decision to leave, contrary to what is in the court application papers that he filed to the Constitutional Court. And one would assume that Senior Counsel Advocate Tembeka Toby, who's representing the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, would have been watching that address by the former President Jacob Zuma and taking notes from it. What we also do know is that the former president thanked Advocate Dalimpofu when he came out and appeared to the ANC members in saying in isiZulu, "Ngibonga kakhulu ngizokwazi ukulala ekhaya namhlanje yilo mnomzane Advocate Mpofu," loosely translated, "I thank Advocate Dalimpofu because today I would be sleeping in jail, but today I will be sleeping at home." So essentially, those lawyers may be advising him on what to say and what not to say. But it may be too little too late on certain things, as the former president has already contradicted himself and his court papers whilst addressing the ANC members on the podium. But about an hour ago, I saw the convoy in which Advocate Mpofu and Advocate Masugu arrived in, leaving towards the Kranskop direction, which would automatically mean they may be heading towards Kranskop, Greytown, and ultimately going to Pietermaritzburg, where the former president will be appearing on Tuesday on that application for a stay in the execution of the arrest.
All right, so we can tell viewers that we did see the chairs being set up, the mics, Mzwanele Manyi speaking there from the Jacob Zuma Foundation. We'll take you live as soon as the former president does address the media, if that scheduled press conference goes ahead. Samkele, in the meantime, you've had a pretty tough day. Just if we can look at the reporting aspect of it, and you were in fact assaulted. Just explain this relationship between the supporters out there and the media.
It's been really tough for the media reporting here because it's been very hostile, particularly from those who are supporting the former president. They've got a perspective that the media in the country is against the former president, and for some odd reason, they seem to also think I'm against the former president, or some may think I'm for the former president. So there is a particular view that journalists are captured, journalists are harsh on former President Jacob Zuma, journalists are harsh on those whom are gathering here outside Nkandla, even though many of them are breaking lockdown regulations. Just yesterday, we as the SABC had an incident where a particular individual who's purporting himself to be an MK veteran or a soldier wearing camouflage uniform hit the SABC camera and tried to stop a live broadcast. We had to quickly call him to order and tell him that that is not allowed in the Republic of South Africa. We will report free, independent and impartial. There were also a number of incidents where a number of colleagues had a run-in with those who are supporting the former president, those who are saying that the media must leave. Earlier on, we were not even allowed to go to the area where the former president was going to speak, and we were stopped by those wearing camouflage uniforms supporting the former president. So it is essentially a very difficult time in the office. I know with myself, I was assaulted by one particular individual who literally came up to me and grabbed my hands and strangled and slapped me and said, "I've sold out and I'm pandering to the white monopoly capital faction that is currently in charge in the country." So it's been very difficult for journalists, but also this is largely due to the irresponsible statements that many political leaders make at times. And I'm not just saying that and only accusing ANC leaders of that. It's across the political spectrum of what many politicians say about journalists. For instance, you go to Carl Niehaus, how he basically incited ANC members against Linda Mnisi, a reporter from one of the 24-hour broadcasting channels, and it prompted journalists to abandon that briefing by Carl Niehaus and pack up their equipment and leave him, and Carl Niehaus had to apologize. So politicians also need to be responsible, as those who are foot soldiers of these political parties then take directives from their leaders, and when it gets to the ground, journalists then become assaulted. And this has happened repeatedly in many political gatherings of political formations or in court cases of many leaders of either the governing party or other political formations.
So, Samkele, we've got some visuals of an altercation that took place yesterday that I think you were involved in. So maybe you can just tell us what is that like? I mean, people are trying to interfere with reporting, which is getting the word out to all other South Africans who aren't at Nkandla.
Well, not to be the story, Francis, but it's very difficult for journalists. For instance, one must applaud the suspended Secretary General of the ANC, Ace Magashule, because in many instances when those individuals who wear camouflage uniform, who purport themselves to be Umkhonto weSizwe military veterans, they at times block journalists. You remember in the Pietermaritzburg High Court when he arrived, it was Ace Magashule who told them to stop pushing and blocking journalists from asking questions. He told them to stop kicking journalists, to stop holding journalists back. Let journalists be free. Let journalists ask their questions, no matter how uncomfortable they may be to him. But some politicians don't do that. They keep quiet, and that adds further fuel to the ground foot soldiers of these political organizations, who then take it upon themselves to assault journalists, to say disparaging things to journalists, to distract journalists from broadcasting and disseminating the very same content that these political organizations will benefit from, because it gets to the masses and to the magnitudes of South Africans who need to hear that particular canvassing messages from these political formations. But it's been very difficult here in Nkandla for journalists across the board. For instance, with myself, the SANEF chairperson, Sibungalwa, as the particular incident of assault was happening, he was walking by and he calmed the situation and spoke to me and said, "Calm down, let's relax, don't retaliate."
Well, thank you for continuing to do the work and bringing us this wall-to-wall coverage that you've been a part of, Samkele Maseko from the SABC. And as you can see on the screen, there's still some preparations for an expected media briefing, which is now very late. The Jacob Zuma Foundation said yesterday there would be a briefing at 6 o'clock. But the president has spoken. He spoke to supporters. The former president spoke to supporters earlier, Jacob Zuma, saying that the current events playing out in Nkandla are as a result of earlier machinations against him in the legal process. Let's take a look at what he had to say. All right, in fact, we're waiting to bring up some of that footage from Nkandla earlier today.